It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to brew the Magic world. As always, that deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video. Like, comment, subscribe, considering becoming a member of the channel. Check out the links in the description. I'd really appreciate it. Today we're finishing up Precon Week for Duskmourn, finishing up the last of the Precon commanders in Winter. Cynical Opportunist, a 4-mana Golgari Ohiman Warlock with Death Touch that says whenever Winter attacks, we mill 3 cards. At beginning our end step, you can exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. If you do, put a permanent from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Winter has an interesting ability, right? We want to stack our graveyard up with Delirium, and then we're going to exile at least 4 cards types worth of cards, and then get one of them back. This is an interesting ability because obviously we can take advantage of permanents cards having multiple types, right? In order to take advantage of that ability, exiling the least amount of things possible, but still getting things back. But what I think is really interesting is this is also a way just to cheat in, right, big things or things that we don't necessarily want to cast. So I think there's a lot of ways you could take this. What I try my best to do is just go self-mill. We're going to put a bunch of things into our own graveyard so we can fulfill Winter's ability. We're going to try to profit from milling ourselves with different effects. And then we're going to add a bunch of recursion pieces next to Winter to try to get these things back for cheaper than we would have to cast them normally. But as far as self-mill goes, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do this. We have Grist, the Hunger Tide, which can +1 to make an insect and then mill a card. If an insect was milled this way, you put a loyalty on it and repeat the process again. I noticed that through the process of a lot of these self-mill cards, there's actually a small insect sub-theme to it, so we do have a small insect sub-theme to the deck. Liliana Death's Majesty's +1 makes a zombie and then mills 2 cards, and that's pretty cool because the -3 can bring a creature back from the graveyard, except it's a zombie in addition to its other types and black in addition to its other colors, which isn't a bad ability at all, right? Because then we can start, again, cheating things back from the graveyard. Gory Grave Troll is kind of an interesting one, so we ideally want it to be in the graveyard. And when it's in the graveyard, it has an ability called Dredge, meaning whenever we would draw a card, we can mill 6 cards instead and bring Grave Troll back to our hand. This is kind of a fun ability because we could potentially be loading up our graveyard with more things that we can potentially use for other abilities. Nyx Weaver automatically mills us 2 at the start of our upkeep, and then we can exile it to bring a card from our graveyard back to our hand, once we want that milling to stop. The new Overlord of the Battlemark feels great here. Whenever it enters or attacks, we can mill 4 and then bring a non-avatar creature or planeswalker card from our graveyard back to our hand. It's a way to potentially save a creature we really want, or just start filling our graveyard even more, getting those things in so we can use them for those abilities. Old Rutstein seems pretty cool here. Whenever it comes in, or at the beginning of our upkeep, we mill a card. If we mill a land, we get a treasure. If we mill a creature, we get a 1/1 insect. If we mill a non-creature down there, we get a blood token. Remember that the blood tokens let you pay to discard and then draw. So you basically have a way to feed more cards into your graveyard. So I like Rutstein because I feel like it does everything we want the deck to do. Buried Alive gives us the option to put 3 creature cards into our graveyard of our choice. This can be very beneficial. Not only loading up the things we potentially want to get back, but we could pick creatures with multiple types in order to better get Winter's ability going. Mulch and Grapple with the Past are very similar ideas of cards, but they look a little bit different. Mulch allows us to reveal the top 4, put all lands into our hand and the rest into our graveyard. And then Grapple with the Past mills 3 and then lets us return any creature or land from our graveyard to our hand. So again, the point is mill ourselves a little bit, but get something back in the process. Again, hopefully feeding our graveyard with more and more things. Same thing with Grizzly Salvage here. Reveal the top 5, put a creature or land from among them into your hand, put the rest in the graveyard. Again, a little bit of mill, but getting our choice thing back. Head Shredder feels like a great spot in this deck. When it attacks, you mill 2. Whenever one or more lands are put into your graveyard from your library, you get to put them on the battlefield tapped. So we can get our lands back. We're not losing the lands, and we're ideally just ramping, right, in the process. Ripples of Undeath allows us to mill 3 at the start of our first main phase, and we can pay 1 and pay 3 life, and if we do, we put a card from among them back into our hand. This is great because it can ideally be filling the things that we want to go to the graveyard to fund Winter's ability. But if we hit a card we really, really need, pay that 1 mana, that 3 life, get it back, and be able to use it again. As far as that self-mill matters goes, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. Amzu, playing with this insect theme, says whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, you make a 1/1 insect, then put a number of counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among those cards. This is cool because then when Winter's exiling those things out of our graveyard, we're going to make that insect every turn as long as Amzu's out, and then that insect has menace. The other version of Grist from Modern Horizons 3 feels really good as well. On the front side, whenever it or another creature enters from our graveyard, or we cast from our graveyard, we can flip Grist into Grist the Plague Swarm. And now on the back side, we have a very similar ability to last time, where we can make an insect and mill 2 cards. But this time we put a death counter on it if the token was if a black card was milled this way. Still have the -2 for some removal, but the -6 is pretty cool. For each card in our graveyard, we just create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an insect. That's a brutal ability if we can load our graveyard up with the right things. I like this Grist a ton, and I think it fits into this deck really well with how much we're trying to load our graveyard. Navor's Flytrap says whenever it enters or attacks, if there's 4 more card types among all the our graveyards, so Delirium, we can distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 creatures. But if we have 6 or more card types, we double the number of counters on those creatures afterwards. So a way to just spread counters around for only a couple mana. We're bringing in Swarm Weaver from the main set. This one looks like a ton of fun. When it enters, you make a couple insect creature tokens with flying. And then as long as we have Delirium, insects and spiders have +1/+1 and Death Touch. This is going to pair with a couple spiders that we have that care about the graveyard that we can use alongside it. Ursine Monstrosity looks like a ton of fun. A 3 mana 3/3 with Trample. This is the beginning of combat on your turn. You mill a card and choose an opponent at random. It has to attack that player this turn if able, and it gets indestructible and +1/+1 for each card type among cards in our graveyard. So a fun attacker that can start getting in, and our opponents have to deal with it. Deluge of Doom just becomes a big, massive -X board wipe, giving all creatures -X on the turn, where X is the number of card types in our graveyard. I like Deluge of Doom because if somebody wipes our board or get a big board wipe, well, we might be able to just hit them back, or do this offensively to just take out everybody's creatures, but only take out our, maybe our little 1/1s in the process. And then Matzalanti from Ixalan feels great here. You have the option to draw a card and then discard a card, which is cool. It's a good option. We may want to do that, right, depending on what we need to load into the graveyard for Winter's ability. But I really like the bottom ability. We could pay forward, transform it only if we have Delirium. Among permanent types, though, so sorcery and instant won't count. And it flips over to the core, which can tap for X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. Not types, just straight permanent cards. Meaning if you can flip this over, this could tap for a ton of mana to help us out in the process. Crawling Infestation and Crawling Sensation are what are going to help feed our insect game plan as well as everything else. At the start of our upkeep, we can mill 2 cards. For Infestation, if creature cards are milled this way, we make a insect. And for Sensation, we make a insect if a land is triggered. So obviously we can get them both out at the same time. We can make a couple insects per turn. Tarmogoyf Nest feels great. Making a Tarmogoyf creature every turn. It's going to get bigger just the more creature card types we have in the graveyard. So you can kind of see we have a mix of effects that want to mill ourselves, get things, or care about things being milled. But how are we going to get things back? Well, we have things like Gloom Shrieker, which is a really cool creature because it has dual typing and being an enchantment and a creature. But when it comes in, we can return something from our graveyard to our hand. Now, it does have the rider that if it would die, it would get exiled instead. So we kind of have to have the choice, right? Does it go to the graveyard and allow us to be 2 types for Winter, or do we want to play it to get something back, right? I kind of like that duality of where it can be used. 6 feels like a slam dunk here. Whenever it attacks, we can mill 3 and bring a land from among them back into our hand, but its main ability is used for the bottom one. As long as it's our turn, non-land permanent cards in our graveyard have retrace, where we could pitch a land in addition to paying their mana cost to bring them back from the graveyard. This is a great ability. It's going to allow us to just take advantage of our graveyard as a second hand, right, by just pitching lands. And if you pair this with something like Head Shredder or other things that even let you pay lands back out of your graveyard, we can still get that back. I think 6 feels really good with a card like Life from the Loam, where you can just bring lands back from your graveyard and keep playing things back out of your graveyard. Breach the Multiverse is a great top-end spell. Everybody mills 10, and then for each player, you choose a creature or planeswalker from their graveyard, and you just get it back. This is brutal in a lot of ways, but it's great because you really just to get... Everybody just mills 10, and you pick the best 4 things that are in each, within each graveyard and just bring them up, right, and just bring them back. Breach a lot of the times is going to be allowing us to get our best piece that hit the graveyard and then just shop from, whatever else anyone else has. Squirming Emergence is a card I think pays off really well here. So we can return to the battlefield, target non-land permanent in our graveyard with mana value less than the number of permanent cards in our graveyard, which shouldn't be very hard and means we can get near anything back as long as it's permanent. So I like this card a ton. Victimize will lets us sack a creature to get 2 creatures back. I like it. It can be very useful to get key creatures back that our opponents have destroyed. The Crypt and Cadaver Lamb are kind of interesting. On the Crypt side, whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, we make a horror token. This, of course, is going to work well with Winter, right, when things leave our graveyard. And then the Cadaver Lab can return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand, in case we want to get something back. I like the Crypt side, being able to start making tokens as we're already trying to do Winter's ability. Polluted Cistern. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into your graveyard from your library, each opponent loses a life for each card to among them. This is fun because when we're milling, we're going to start dealing damage, life to our opponents in that way. And then on the Oubliette side, whenever we unlock it, we mill 3 and bring a creature from our graveyard back to the battlefield. So this can just straight recur something. So I like the flexibility here. Same thing with Walk-in Closet. The Closet side lets you play lands from your graveyard. And the Cellar side that says that you may cast spells from your graveyard this turn. And if a card be put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile instead. So they don't even have to come back with a finality counter on them. It's just if you cast a spell, it's exiled instead. Otherwise, we're just getting things back for 5 mana. Now, it's just that turn, right? So we have to have the mana. But, I think we're going to do a pretty good job at getting the mana needed to take a shot on something like Cellar. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at it. And I think we're going to learn a lot very quickly playtesting this tech. Mainly, do we have enough self-mill and do we have enough recursion? What I talked about was 6 pairing with Life from the Loam. Life from the Loam's not in the deck just because of the cost of Life from the Loam, money-wise. I still try my best on these episodes to keep the budget somewhat fair, but I think Life from the Loam's a slam dunk to come back in. It has Dredge on it. It returns lands back to your hand. I think it's everything you want in a card. My problem was I honestly just didn't know what to cut. I kind of got to the point with the deck where everything looked so good, I just didn't know what to cut out, but I think it would be probably a card I would bring right back in. Rise of the Witch King makes some sense. Each player sacks a creature, and if you sacked a creature this way, you just get a permanent back from your graveyard. I like it. I guess it's a little bit more mana at 4 mana, but it feels like a great card. And again, it just becomes, do we have enough recursion? Do we need more? And if we need more, the Witch King comes back in. Same thing with Value of Persistence there on the right. Beginning your upkeep, put a creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield of your control. Now we could potentially reanimate from everybody's graveyard. Again, just the question becomes, do we have too much recursion? Do we not have enough? And I think all 3 of these cards are trying to, really in all reality, play into the recursion side. Do we have enough of it? Do we need more? And if so, we can bring some of it in. But let's get into our playtest here. Keeping a 4-lander with Noxious Gearhulk, Culling Ritual, a great board wipe that can add some mana. And then Mulch. So we got a good way to get at least the Mulch going here on turn 2. Turn 1, we see Crawling Sensation. Okay, so we got a kind of fun way to get the start. We'll get the Dark Moss Bridge down since there's not much to do turn 1. Turn 2, we see Unmarked Grave, and this is an interesting card. There are multiple of these in the game, but we talked about Buried Alive, right, with creatures. But Unmarked Grave just says, search your library for a non-legendary card, dump it into your graveyard. I'm not quite sure what to Unmarked Grave yet, but I think I'm willing to mulch here. Reveal the top 4. Put all lands this way into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, right? So Arcane Signet, Hornet Queen, and then Rendmaw. That's the alternate commander for the deck, and that is actually multiple typing, artifact and creature. Enters whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player creates a 2/2 bird token with flying. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. So, okay, we're starting to build our graveyard for winter, so we definitely got some options there, right? Turn three, I think we get the sensation down, get that started, so that way we can start netting some insects and fill our graveyard even up more for winter, right? Is it start of upkeep? I apologize. So we're going to mill the two. We get Abrupt Decay and Squirming Emergence. So both good cards, and we now have one, two, three, four card types in our graveyard. So we do have Delirium. We did not get a land, so we're not going to get the insect. But now Winter would be turned on as far as its abilities go. So I think we'll get Winter down. And now the question becomes, do we want to get something back? So remember, we have to exile we have to exile four card types. And if we do, we can bring a permanent from among the things exiled back. So if we do like Renmaw, right, we have artifact and creature. So the question becomes, do we ever want to get the Abrupt Decay back? Because we can get it back with, or is it only permanents back with Winter? It is only permanents. Okay, so my thought process here is Abrupt Decay, Mulch, and Renmaw, right? That's four. Bring Renmaw back. You know, we'll lose the Mulch and the Decay, and now we have Renmaw back that we could play, you know, on a future turn. Oh, sorry, it's back to the battlefield, isn't it? I apologize, I forgot. It's back to the battlefield. So Finality counter on it. When it enters, everybody makes a black bird. Everybody else gets it. They're all goaded. Go to our next turn. We're going to mill 2 forest and a dryad. So that is going to get us a 1/1 insect. We'll draw for turn. Sorry. We'll draw for turn. We see that Polluted Cistern. So that's going to be good for future turns if we can get that guy down. Let's see, Treasure Vault. I only have one black source at the moment. So I can't like Cistern and, and do like an unmarked grave, which is something to keep in mind. So whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types. Okay. So I think I like the Cistern. Start prepping that for next turn so we can start, hurting people with that. We'll play the Treasure Vault, which will trigger off that to get another bird. It is both an artifact and a land, right? And then I think that's really it. I mean, I've got 3 mana left, but I don't really see any use for it at the moment, right? I don't have any other black sources. There's nothing too much else I want to do. Question for not is whether I can get in an attack with Winter. If I can get in a free attack with Winter, I'll happily mill the 3. We're still at Delirium, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. We're still at Delirium. But I don't really want to. I really want to get Dryad back this turn, since it'll turn all my lands into everything, right? It's the one that I ideally want to get back here. So let's take the example where I have the attack with Winter, and let's do it. 1, 2, and 3 for my mill. That's going to get Crawling Sensation, allowing me to make another insect. Just puts more cards in the graveyard for that. Cistern's going to go off. Everybody's going to lose 2 because of the 2 card types, instant and land. So I like that there. Winter got in right there with Death Touch as a 2/5. I'm sure there's a good attack there that we can get in, especially with that having Death Touch. And then maybe Renmaw has a good attack. But at any rate, we'll move to end step. We should have plenty here to be able to do it. So I'm thinking Forest, Dryad, and Putrefy. Getting the Dryad back, exiling Putrefy and the land. And that is whenever you play a card, that's not play, right? That just comes back from the graveyard. But now, right, all of our lands have every type. So now we have access to more of our mana for next turn. Starting on our upkeep, I think I want to mill the 2, getting Valgavoth's Lair and Swamps. That is 2 lands, but that's also 2 types. Everybody would lose 2, and we would make that insect. Draw for turn. We will, I guess, put the Bajuka Bog in tap. Nuke somebody's graveyard. Put the Bloom Snarl in tapped because we can play an extra turn or an extra land with Dryad. Still 5 mana here, so we can't quite do the Noxious Revival yet, but Probably not a bad idea for do we want to unmark grave something, right? So this turn we have lands, enchantment land too, so that's already two. We could just as easily go get a creature we really want, right? And grave it into our graveyard and get it back this turn. So I think I'm going to do that. The question is, what do we go get? What is going to push our game forward? The answer, there's a lot of ways to. We also don't have to get a creature, right? We could get a permanent. We could get an enchantment. We could get a lot of different things. Things like Vitality that would allow our creatures to tap for mana. Bailmark could start getting more things into our graveyard, right? Every time when it comes in or attacks, we're milling 4. We could get something like Grist back. We could get something like the flip Grist, right? Because when we exile it and get it back, we could then flip it over, right? And then we would have access to the backside of Grist. That's something we could do. We could get the Tarmogoyf Nest to start making those. I think there's a lot of options here. Like, you always have something like Hedge of 6, so we can start playing things back out of our graveyard, but it's only permanents. I kind of like Grist, especially the backside of Grist. I think there's a lot of ways we could take this. I also really like the Overlord of the Bailmark because it can start milling things and just filling up our graveyard even more. Let's do the Overlord. It has to be non-legendary, right? So I just realized I can't do Grist. It has to be non-legendary. So let's do the Bailmark. Let's get into combat, right? Might as well attack with the birds. Attack with Renmaw. We'll attack with Winter and Mill 3. Mortuary, Grist, and Swamp. Okay, cool. So we ended up getting Grist, right? Anyway, so that gives us another option there. And then, let the attacks fall where they may. We'll move to the end step. Now the quick choice is, do I want Grist or the Bailmark? We could set up for Grist next turn. How I'd be probably do this, we'll stop this playtest here and go to the next one just so we don't take up too much time. But my thought would be either do one or the two of them now. Maybe do Grist this turn and do Bailmark next turn. My only thought with Grist this turn is then we can flip it over, right? And start working on getting it up to -6 so we could even copy something like the Bailmark from the graveyard. Or we could Bailmark and just start feeding our graveyard more. I think there's a lot of ways to look at that. If I take Grist, you do something like Valgavoth Slayer and maybe unmarked grave. If I want the Bailmark, then you go for a land and maybe something else and get it back that way. But let's get into playtest number 2. I just hope that goes to show you how much that milling can really determine what you choose to get from it. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Valgavoth Slayer, Evolving Wilds, and Dakmor Salvage. A land we'd love to get into the graveyard because it has Dredge. We have starting our hand, Crawling Infestation, Insidious Roots, which allows our tokens to tap for mana, but whenever one or more creatures leave our graveyard, we get a plant, and then put a +1/+1 counter each plant. This is great with Winter, because then our plants are going to start growing. And then Lignify. Lignify is interesting because it's actually a dual type card because it has Tribal and Enchantment, so it's the only Tribal card we have in our deck for the purposes of having, more card types, but obviously not a bad hand. Turn 1, we see Rutstein. I'm trying to think if there's any, better thing to do this turn. We could get Evolving Wilds down, go get a land of our choice, maybe get a swamp so we can turn on Tainted Wood. But that basically just puts puts one of our 4 types we need, right, in our graveyard. Turn 2, we draw the Zask, another one of these insects where whenever another insect whenever you can play lands and play insects from your graveyard, and then it can give insects Death Touch, so again, works with all these other abilities. I kind of like the roots here. Get that started for future turns. Turn 3, we see Matt Lizanti. Okay, well, unfortunately, both of our lands we can play this turn come in tapped. So I guess we'll put Valgavoth's Lair in as green. I doubt we'll have anything to Lignify this turn, so we'll just kind of hold where we're at. Turn 4, same thing, Dakmor Salvage. Dakmor Salvage has to come in taps. So I kind of like the idea of Matt Lazanti. I think Matt Lazantley. I think Crawling Infestation would make sense as well. But I think the thing I like about Matt Lazantley is I can start putting things from my hand into my graveyard. Like I can do that right now, right? We're gonna tap it to draw a card. Oh, there we go. We can put Grist in our graveyard and then get it back with Winter potentially as soon as next turn, depending on what else we pitch, right? Because think about it, I could pitch Grist this turn, pitch Lignify next turn, and then that's 4 in my graveyard, right? So let's think about doing it that way. Remember, we have to transform it when we have 4 card types among permanents in our graveyard, which would happen next turn. But the problem is we have to pay for it and tap it. So we could potentially try to flip Matt Lazanti before we do Winter. There's a couple different ways we could look at this here. But turn 5, we'll play Shifted Woodland, kind of a fun card, which can turn into a copy of things in our graveyard. And I think we Winter. And then I think we Matt Lazanti to draw. Okay. Well, there's Nyx Weaver, but that's only one type. I think we ideally want to get the Lignify in the graveyard. Just so that way, if we wanted to go for Grist... Oh, no. Okay. Whew, okay. If we wanted to get them all this turn to get Grist back, we could. And we do have the green mana to do it, which makes me kind of want to just go to my end step. Did these come from exile? It does come from exile. So I can't flip it immediately, can I? Does that change my choice? I don't think it does. I think I'd still get Grist back. That is a creature leaving our graveyard, so we'll make a plant and then put a counter on it. Because that Grist did leave our graveyard. Okay, so maybe it would have been more ideal if I could have flipped Grist, but I think we'll be okay. There's plenty of options that we can do now going forward as far as that goes. But we'll come in here for turn 6. Remember, this plant can now tap for mana, so we're up to 6 mana total. I like the idea of Rutstein to start milling and getting more value. We could leave something like Assassin's Trophy up. We have that grapple. Let's play Rutstein. He's going to come in and mill us a card, which is a land. So we're going to make a treasure. So we're back up to 4 mana this turn. I like the Infestation to maybe set up for future turns, right? And I guess leave the treasure up. Let's tap Matt Lazanti to draw and then discard, right? Might as well. I've got land in there. Let's pitch the Nyx Weaver. So now we've got another card type in there. And then Winter can attack this turn. If we have a good, let's say we have a good attack for it, we mill Vivirescent Bog, Swamp, and Binding the Old Gods, which will trigger Infestation. No, just creatures. Anywhere during your turn. Okay, so we would have gotten it for pitching the Nyx Weaver. Sorry, I forgot. I thought Infestation was Sensation with the lands, but that is a green insect token. Okay. We'll move to end step, and the question becomes: do I want to get anything back? I can get Binding the Old Gods. Well, no, I can't. I could have to do. I don't have 4 types. I only have 3. So nothing quite yet. Again, hopefully we can get Grist to flip over soon by getting something back out of our graveyard. But at any rate, we would move to end step there. I think we have, our 2 mana left? I think we tapped it for... So we just have the treasure left. Coming to our next turn, we'll mill with a Sensation. We did not mill a creature. So nothing there, but we did add another extra land type there to our graveyard. Oh, there we go. There's Gloomshrieker. Bring something back to hand. I'm trying to think, how do I get something from my graveyard back to the battlefield for Grist? Not right now at the moment. We've got 3, 5, 6, 7 mana, 8 with the treasures. We got lots of options. I could flip Matt Lazanti this turn. Potentially, let's see, 1, 2... just 3 types among permanents. We would need 1 more. I don't want to do this. Let's grapple. right? Mill 3, we get a land, artifact, so there's 4, and then mulch, and we get to bring a land or creature from our graveyard back to our hand. We could do Nyx Weaver, right? That would help us start milling more. Or we could just get a land back. I might want to honestly do Winter this turn to get Head Shredder back because it's such a good card. We'll get the Bog back just so we have the option for more mana. Did we mill a creature? We did not, so no Sensation trigger. Sorry, Rutstein would have milled us as well. I don't know if I can fix that now. It would have been the first card, which was Viridescent Bog, right? So it would have been a land. Eek. Sorry, guys, I can't fix that one now. Anyway, that would have milled a creature then off of a Sensation. That would have milled the Secure Tri-Builder. Okay, I think we fixed where we need to be. Play the Bog for turn. Gloom Shrinker could also get Head Shredder back to hand, right? We could then still use. We could still then use Winter to get like Binding the Old Gods back. This is just one of those situations where now it just becomes punishing. Like, what do you want to get back when? You know, I know it kind of sounds like semantics, but the truth is like it just comes down to what are you trying to get. I wish I had one good way to recurse something back other than do that. But anyway, I'm going to stop the playtest there. I think we've gotten to a point where we kind of understand where we're going. It's just a matter of the semantics of it. So what do you guys think of Winter? I think I've built a pretty functional deck. Yes, I'm not a master of it by any means. It would take me some time to really learn this in testing, but those are the decks that I tend to enjoy the most, is learning how things function and how I can make it better. But I'd love to hear what you think of Winter down in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys next.